everyone. My name is Carolyn Hinds, film critic and journalist. So this is one of my special interviews for kcrushhamerica magazine, and it's for the 2024 ShortShorts Film Festival and Asia Film Festival in Japan. And today, I'm very happy to be joined by filmmaker Nguyễn Hồng Anh to talk about her film Saigon Kiss, which I really love. It's a film where basically these two young women, they meet each other on the very, very busy streets of Saigon, and they don't go on an adventure. I think they just go on a bit of a journey where one of the characters, Moa, she sees Van, and Van's bike isn't working, so she basically pushes her and helps her go to get her bike repaired. And in the process, to get to know a little bit about each other, and like feelings start to spark, like crushes start to develop. And for Van, like I get like even in this very short opening sequence and introduction to the character, Van knows who she is. She knows what she wants to do. She's a dancer. She's training and working to improve that. Whereas from Mog, she is kind of like in this kind of like indeterminate space where she's kind of running from a relationship and avoiding it. And it's basically, I think, like Van's job is to help Ma kind of like come to a resolution about the relationship she's running from. But I'm very happy to be joined by Hong Ah to talk about the film today. Thank you so much, Hong Ah, for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel very lucky that you got to catch the film at ShortShorts, because I think it was screening in a very small program. So I'm happy you got to see it.
Yeah, I did. I love the film. So typically, I usually sometimes like to ask my filmmakers like what got them involved with filmmaking at the beginning, because I always say no one's journey is the same. But I have sent you like some preliminary questions, and I kind of want to start my question and phrase it a bit different, because I kind of see like a parallel between the journey the characters go on, and is I want to ask you how this film helped you as a filmmaker in the journey of making it, because I think so much of this film is really about the two characters. And I guess like maybe the people of Saigon are always on the move, like everyone is busy. So like how in making the film did you like change your outlook on perhaps being a filmmaker and a writer?
Wow, it's such a big question. I think I've never been asked that before, but it was really interesting to reflect on that. I think one of the things I knew that was going to be challenging with Saigon Kiss was we filmed in Vietnam, which is my mother country, because both of my parents are Vietnamese, but I myself grew up in Germany, and my relationship to Vietnam is now stronger. But I think over the years, I had a lot of like yearning to learn more about the culture, especially learn the language and what queerness within Vietnamese culture means. And so to me, it was incredibly intimidating to decide I want to do a short film in Vietnam, in a place where I didn't know anyone in the industry. I barely knew enough, of the language to be working in Vietnamese with local crew. And I didn't know anything about shooting permits, all of these details, that, I had somewhat, years of experiences before already, like growing up in Germany, making films, and then studying in Scotland, and having done films there. So it was a little bit wild to decide that, but I learned so much by just, I learned so much about my roots, about myself, about my family, about the city, about the mentality, about the diversity within our culture, and and also about like filmmaking. I think one of the two surprising things that come to my mind when I was thinking about the question was, I always knew that Saigon Kiss was going to be a romance. And I think it's a genre that is quite underrated, because when I started writing it, I realized it's actually incredibly difficult to write a good romance, or like a meet cute that is believable, especially if you're telling a story that doesn't borrow from the heteronormative like canon of all the mainstream love stories that are out there. And that was really challenging for me. I think I wrote like many different versions of their meet cute, how things could unfold. Yeah, so that was a challenge. And the second thing I also learned was, we have like all these beautiful driving scenes, like all these montages, we have drone shots, all these like things that were quite complicated and technically more challenging. But to me, to write and direct the most simple story beats was the biggest challenge. Like, when like the meet cute, for example, or when they, are about to part ways, where we don't have any fancy camera movement, but we just point the camera at these two characters who are just in this moment. And there is kind of nothing fancy technically to highlight or, hide how raw this encounter and this connection is. So I just realized that, there's so much complexity in very simple moments.
Yeah, and what you said just actually reminded me of something another director that I interviewed said. Ikeda K. He's also another filmmaker who has a short film showing at the festival. And he said one of the reasons he likes to do kind of like long takes in his film is because life is unedited. We don't get to do we don't get to redo scenes. And like in making a film like this, in like Saigon Kiss or films of similar genre where it's a romance, but it's a romance based on reality. It's not relying on any cute hijinks or anything like that, where you have to make the blooming romance believable, but you have to do it in a way where, like, if it happened in real life, and it could happen in real life, the way how you set it up, it does feel very like you kind of like just watch these two people just randomly meet. Is that life is unedited? You don't get to redo your first meeting. You don't get to like make it perfect. Where it has to be perfect. And for Saigon Kiss, the way that Moa meets Bang is like, as the moment it's happening, she's hanging up the phone for a phone call for a interaction that she doesn't want to have. And for many people, it's like that. You could be having an argument with someone on the phone. You might be like distracted and looking at something random, and then you just turn around and you see something out the corner of your eye. And that's how life is. You don't get to, and that's why we always say first impressions are so important, because you don't get to redo a first impression. And I guess, and like you were saying, as a filmmaker, in writing this, you have to make them meet cute believable but romantic, and it's also a struggle because you're like, how would this actually happen? And like, there are people who are romance writers and say they a lot of their best work comes where they just imagine like, what would I want happen for me? And it's like, oh, I just want this simple moment turn into something beautiful and has potential. You don't need all the romantic music. You don't need, because in this film, the sound that we're hearing is the sound of the motorbikes on the streets of Saigon. There's no big elaborate musical score or whatever happens when they meet each other. Like, it's not like two eyes meeting across. No, it's like, oh, she's like, oh, this is someone walking on the side of the highway. We're just like thousands of motorbikes on Saigon just like passing through them. So I completely understand, and I appreciate that you did that with the film, that you didn't try to make it into a bigger moment than it needed to be.
Absolutely. And I think what I wanted to add also, I think audiences' expectations for romance films are also different than other genres, because I think for like, let's say horror, for example, or thrillers, like the point of references that audience have is another body of work that is within a cinema context. But for romance, I mean, like, it's such a universal feel it like theme, and like everyone has experience like in this genre of life, that I feel like when we watch a story that is supposed to be like, two people meeting in a romantic setting, we all refer to our own life instead of just, the body of work of cinema. So then to compete, I think like to construct something on the page and then have that compete, you know, in terms of like authenticity to life, and you know, versus just like genre tropes, is like I never thought about how challenging it would be, you know.
I imagine it is. So like I mentioned just on the scene where they're with where they met. Why am I getting so tongue-tied today? So what I like about that is visually how the sequence is set up is that and it kind of made me think of how these two characters are like kind of contrast, and like just how sometimes the thing that really catches our eye is that something that just stands out against the norm of what we're seeing. Is like for Van, the reason she stands out to Moa is because she's not on her bike. Her bike is broken off, so she's walking while everyone is like just riding past them like constantly, and that's what catches the eye. So I wanted to ask you about choosing to have that be the way that they're introduced, because I'm a kind of person that I kind of like to read stuff into films sometimes, and sometimes I read way too much into a scene. But I kind of saw it as representative of Van representing something different than what Mo is accustomed to in her life. You know, like she's doing something that everyone else isn't doing, and that's what really I think attracts Mo's attention.
Wow, I love that. I love that. Like that's the meaning that you extracted from it. Actually, like that scene where she sees her, where Mo sees Bun or Vicky push the bike. It's a very everyday life scene plucked from, you know, just the streets of Saigon. And the motorbike that Van is pushing is it used to be my old motorbike, and it's a really old bike that is, you know, nice and vintage and whatnot, but it would break down every 2 weeks or so because I don't have a fuel indicator on it. So when the tank is empty, it's just empty, and it stops right in the middle of the street by the side of the road. And you know, when you come to Saigon, or when you like observe the streets, you will actually like see this quite often, that someone is pushing their motorbike along the street. And what I find so beautiful is that like within minutes, really, there is someone else, a stranger, a total stranger, coming to help you and offer support, whether it's like pushing you to the next petrol station, or like trying to find a mechanic with you. And I think that's something that, as someone who didn't grow up in Saigon, and you know, like my family is also not from the city, so whenever I come here and I spend time here, I observe the city from like a quite external perspective. And I think, to me, what sets Saigon as this like big modern metropolis apart from other cities like Tokyo or New York is that, yes, you know, there are 10 millions of people living in the city, and yes, you can feel like a sense of alienation or loneliness like you would feel in other cities. But you know, I think like this feeling has a very warm and intimate like nature to it, because of how physically intimate you are to strangers on the street, and how warm and open, you know, strangers are in the middle of traffic, you know, in rush hour, as they would just interrupt their everyday monotonous life to help you, and like they inconvenience their own flow and life because they want to support you. And so yeah, they're meet cute, as I struggled so much to like write a believable one, just was birthed from observing the streets here.
And you mentioned your bike. I've actually visited your Instagram page, and I saw you had a picture of your bike. You were like, she held on until the end until she could. And I thought it was interesting that you used the very same bike in the film. And what you're talking, so something just occurred to me is like, I think something that makes Saigon in particular a very, very unique country. I think maybe the only other country that might be very similar to it is probably like Mumbai, because where they have like so many motorbike riders, or and in the Caribbean, we have them, but not anywhere to that number of people on the road at the same time. And I think what makes this film and like other films set in Saigon and maybe like Mumbai and other places like it that really stand out is because in North America and like most of Western countries and even like Europe and stuff, like the traffic we see is cars. And the thing with cars is that cars are enclosed, you know, we don't get to interact with the people like in the cars around us the way that motorbike riders would get to interact with each other, you know, like to be able to like what Atma does, she's able to pull over and like help because like maneuvering a bike is way easier than maneuvering a car. And also like it like not having that barrier around you helps with like I guess like I just said like making things and interactions more personable. So as you were talking, it kind of made me think like, yeah, interaction like this wouldn't necessarily happen with a car. If you do, there's a way more complexity involved with like crafting a scene like this using a car or like and like a film like that kind of scene set in North America wouldn't work the exact same way. So I think that's where like for me like a film like this really works because it's set in like Saigon, you know, like it couldn't really happen anywhere else.
Yeah, that's right. And I think like somehow like, you know, the form of transport for the majority of people, it just like informs the way we interact with each other. Yeah, because I'm not sure, you know, whether like a similar meet cute, even if it was like in cars, like let's say it was set in Germany, whether it would be the same quality of, you know, warmth or intimacy or, you know, like there's something very, yeah, local or very Vietnamese that is informed by just the method of transport, which is a motorbike, you know.
Yeah, because like when mom start like she pushes the bike by using her foot, and I'm like, yeah, that can't happen any other way.
I can't do that either. Like I have like, you know, no, I every time I like drive past someone whose motorbike is broken, I wish, you know, I had that capability to like just give back because so many people have helped me before, but it's really difficult. It's really difficult.
Yeah, so you're talking about that whole like talk to me a bit about working with the actresses with that because the reason why I think I wanted to talk a bit about this particular introduction to sequence is because it pays so I think it really pays into how their relationship developed, you know, because like their introduction is with Ma helping Van, you know, like it's like her taking time out of her day and like putting in physical effort to like help her push this motorbike to a mechanic to get it fixed. And like that's not a regular like introduction, you know, like where she's like immediately letting Van know like I'm helpful to you, you know, like I'm someone who doesn't mind giving without expecting anything in return. Like I'm okay with physically exerting myself to help you get where you need to be. So I think it's such an interesting, I just found that whole thing very fascinating. And it happens for a very long time. Like the sequence is actually really long where like they're like on the highway and like they're pushing and like it's not like a 2-minute sequence like where she's like pushing the bike. It like happens like for a very long time.
Yeah, I think it's again it's just like what people do here, I guess. It's like almost as if that scene is just you know visual memory from all the many times that this has happened to me. And you know it has happened like enough times that I wouldn't say that, you know, these few strangers were exceptions, you know, and I would say like, oh, I just had a good day and I was very lucky that someone happened to pull over. But I think it's just really part of the infrastructure, you know, that generosity in time and selflessness.
And how did you work with the two actresses to get it done? Because like they're not like stunt performers doing it, like they're doing these sequences themselves. So like what was it like first like casting for actors for a rom-com is difficult in itself because you have to make sure they have chemistry, but you have to make sure that they can do what you need them to do as performers, like be able to like you said, you yourself, you ride the bikes, but you can't push them, right? So you needed someone who could actually do to do these scenes and is able to like maneuver the bike through the streets and be able to stay in character, you know, like not get distracted by like all the chaos happening around. So what was the casting
For
process
sure.
like for them?
I think that was like one of our biggest worries, that we have all these dialogue scenes between the two actors on the bike in the middle of traffic. And, you know, like with, you know, Vietnam, you can't block. I mean, and also with the budget that we had, with a small independent film, like we couldn't like block off sections of streets and then have like lots of extras flood the frame. So we could like have it safe and all that. But so my producer was like really worried about how we're going to do this, how we're going to do this safely, how we can do this without, you know, affecting the performance. And so it's funny that you say that they're not stunt people, but actually Mo, the actress, Chuk New, she's a stunt coordinator, and she has 10 years of stunt performance, yeah, under her belt. And but I didn't know this, because I actually, when we were casting, one of the things that like were more important to me, that as much as possible, I wanted to cast someone who's queer for this queer character, for both of them. And there aren't that many openly queer actors in the Vietnamese film industry currently, and especially I think now there is more people who have come out and like more visible, just because, you know, things are changing and all that. But definitely back then when we were casting, there weren't that many people, and we like, definitely I didn't know anyone. And I knew of Chuk New because a friend of mine introduced her to me and said, like, look, she is queer and she works in the film industry. She has many years like working as a stunt coordinator. And I'm like, this is amazing. But obviously I didn't know whether she'd be able to act. And because as a stunt performer, you know, actually like the majority of your work entails hiding your face and like not showing, you know, your performance on screen, but just, you know, being the body double and doing all the, you know, dangerous tricks. So I was just very, very lucky that when we invited Chuk New to auditions, that she was perfect for the role. And for her to be able to not only you know, like drive safely, but also make her co-star Thương Ly, who is in the role of Van, feel safe and secure, was just such a gift. Yeah. And so we had Chuk New first, because you know, she has more screen time and all, and she had, yeah, she was the lead. And then the bigger challenge was to find someone who could match her and like somehow have chemistry with her. So we auditioned a lot of people, and it was quite difficult because I I was really set on Chuk New. I like, you know, if you came in to audition for Van and you couldn't, you know, it didn't work, yeah, we just like continued to look. And Thương Ly is actually a dancer. She's never been in a film before. She's never acted before. And I saw her a couple of years ago in a performance piece where she was dancing, and I just she has such a striking face, you know, and her presence is so strong. So I think I just like put her in, you know, the back of my mind, you know, in some stored consciousness. And when we were looking for a dancer, I just like remembered her and we called her up, but it was just such a gamble. I had no idea whether she would A, pick up the phone, and B, was interested in, you know, acting. And C, I didn't know whether she could act or not. But yeah, we spent a lot of time rehearsing, and the two got to know each other. And I think also I love spending time with actors. And I studied theater and film. So in theater, you spend so much time. You have the privilege of having all this rehearsal time with your actors, right? So I really like to, when possible, implement that. And so we spend a lot of time together. And I think that's how we slowly, build that chemistry between both of them.
And
But I think I was very lucky. Like those two were just perfect for the role. And I don't know, they were just like sent.
but that's the thing with making like independent films, in particular like short films, is and where you don't have much of a budget. Like you just said, use the word gamble, where like there are so many filmmakers that I've interviewed, and so many other agencies I know, where like they saw someone like maybe like a few years ago, they're like, and they story the information that, and they start working on a project. You know what? This person would be perfect, and it's like like there are technically like what's the word? No, not technically, like figuratively perfect for you, yeah, because like you wanted a dancer, you're like, oh, this person is a dancer, like she'll stand out on this on screen and everything, because that's the other thing, like when Ma sees Van, like she stands out, like because her, like she's very physically striking and all of that, and you're like, oh, she has everything that I need, like the dancing ability, the face and everything, but you're like, but can she act, and it's like that's such a gamble with making films, like. And I guess, but that's also the beauty of making independent films, and particularly short films, is that you get to find these hidden gems in people who maybe never considered themselves to be performers and actors. And even if they never make another film again, like they have this experience of doing this, and you're like, for this very brief time in making the film, you found the perfect person to play the perfect character for you. So I wasn't in, I hadn't even intended to ask this question, but talk to me a bit about the magic of I guess like making these kind of films and like working like with people that you never maybe thought you were going to work with them, and then you're like, and then even people who never considered that they have the talent to be an actor, or never considered being in a film, and being the person to help them kind of like learn this new side of themselves, because like you said, like she was a dancer, and then for the other actress, she's a stunt performer, and like this is the time where she's getting to show the audience her face. She's not pretending to be someone else. She's getting to perform as herself. So talk to me about being able to like helping them to like open up like a beautiful flower and show new sides of themselves. I don't know why you came up with that metaphor, but yes.
I think I'd like to think that they had fun also, because I think what really helped was that we shot on original location, right? So we were in, in the actual streets of Saigon, and there wasn't that needed to look real. So I think that also just helps you, like someone who's not a trained actor, to just be there because your surroundings are real. I'm not actually sure, whether both of them ever want to continue acting and like showing their face, because Kat or Chuknyu, she is like really happy and like really excited to be a stunt coordinator, because she was a stunt performer for so long, and now she gets to choreograph and design these action scenes, and she gets all the big gigs of like blockbuster films in Vietnam. So maybe I should ask her. I'll get back to you about that. And Tuong is a dancer who is also really happy to dance, like she does all sorts of like different, very interesting performances. Like she has a hip hop background, but now does a lot of contemporary dance, and is in a show in Central Vietnam permanently as a performer. But I know that from other directors who have seen Saigon Kiss, they really want both of them to continue acting and be in other projects. But whether they want it, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, no, their energy on screen is so it's very like relaxed and also very comfortable. Like you'd never know that this was their first project for both of them. And I think that's also a credit to you as the director in making sure that they're comfortable on screen, and that they are able to like do what you need them to do as performers, because directing new talent is not easy, it's not to be underestimated at all. And I think that's a credit to you as the director and everyone that worked on them the film. And like when you were writing the script, like I thought it was like so interesting that you mentioned like for Tripna, she's a stunt coordinator, and like whereas for the character of Ma, she is a martial artist. You know, she's a martial arts instructor, and for Tripna, she's an actual dancer in real life. And like when you were writing the characters, what inspired you to pick these particular careers for both of the characters? Because they're I see them as kind of like contrasts of each other, where they both use their bodies for their jobs. And we're at but the thing that I thought was interesting is for Mark, she kind of just sees martial arts as her job. This is just what she's doing. This is how she's making a living. Whereas for Vance, she's dancing because this is her calling. You know, this is like she loves it. Like it inhabits everything she does. So like they're opposites in that way, and how they both use their bodies, but they use their talents for very different reasons, and they relate to them very differently. So talk about crafting the characters, like choosing these different professions for both of them.
Yeah, I think like there were 2 points that like I wanted to incorporate into this decision of like what their career paths are. And one of it is that obviously, the city, which is like, almost like a third character, a third main character in the film, is constantly in motion. And so we see the traffic that is also like constantly in motion. Everything in the film is moving all the time. And even if like we're seated, other things in the frame are moving around, And I like the idea to translate that into the characters on a personal level, that they also, they make their living from something that is also like movement, and both do that. They do it differently, but it's also the thing that connects them and that they have in common. So even though, it's quite on like two opposite spectrums, like martial arts is very disciplined and it has a very strict form, whereas like contemporary dance is like very freeing and the choreography is more fluent. Both of them still, work with their bodies in motion to a choreography. And yeah, it's kind of like the traffic of Saigon, like it looks chaotic and it looks like there is, no structure to it and it's quite free, but actually there is a choreography to it and it's somehow regulated and there is a rhythm to it and a flow. Yeah, and I think what I wanted to also show is that obviously Bun is the contemporary dancer because she's like the free-spirited one, like the one who is maybe doesn't like the conventional route. And that's why she is in between decisions. Like, should I stay here in this familiar city or should I go seek something new? Maybe she doesn't like the traditional trajectory of like what happens after graduating. And Mer is someone who is maybe more like the protector in a relationship, and like someone who likes a certain routine and a predictability. And this is like why she's like thrown so off course and is in between, because the routine that she knows from her old relationship, it doesn't quite work anymore and she feels trapped in that. So their attraction for each other lays in like, the contrasting occupation that the other one embodies. Like, like I think Mer is attracted to Van's free-spirited, contemporary dance, and Van is maybe like inspired by like how Mer brings in this like role of like the protector and like supporter and like yeah.
Mm. Yeah, and
with stability, someone.
they
Yeah.
do, and but the thing is that what I thought was interesting is even though Ma, she likes, I no not you know what, I think one of the reasons that she's so hesitant to like make that final definitive cut with the previous relationship is because, as you just said, she likes the routine, you know, like it's something she's familiar with, and she knows that once she makes that decision of like, you know what, stop calling me for the very last time, she knows that she's gonna lose that routine and she's gonna feel like what's the next step, what do I do? But then again, that's where for me the metaphor of the traffic of Van being there to help, um not even push like but she's pulling Ma away from the thing that she's running from, you know, she's helping her to move forward, reluctantly, not even reluctantly, because Ma is a person who offers to help Van to move, you know, but she's there and she's like helping her to like move forward from this place that she's stuck in, this relationship that she's afraid to let go of. And like the ending of the film is very ambiguous, but then it made me think like there's a saying like, you know, there are people who come into your lives for seasons. And you know, and like even if like she never meets Van again, like Van's purpose in her life has been achieved to help her to move on from this place where she was stuck in, and helped her move on with her cat. But you know, but I kind of didn't see the ending as sad. I kind of saw it as like necessary, you know, where she like, if anything, people be like, she wondered like, was this person even really there in my life? You know, she was there for a day and then she's just gone, you know. But then it's like, but she fulfilled her purpose. Anything else that happens after that's kind of like a bonus. So I think it's interesting that Ma as a character was so undecided, whereas as like a martial artist, she has to be very decisive in her actions. You know, and deals with control. You have to be controlled because you have to make sure you don't hurt yourself and hurt the person that you're like sparring with. And as an instructor, she has to teach self-control to her students. But she in this person in her personal life doesn't have the control that she has in her professional life. So I thought that was interesting for a character like her. Like her personal life doesn't reflect her outward appearance. Her outer appearance shows someone who's very in control, who's strong, and who knows what they want. But then, like, her personal life is a mess.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's again like this, you know, what's the saying of like doctors can't take their own medicine, or like, you know, yeah.
Yeah.
It's always easier to do it for someone else, but then when it comes to doing it for you, taking care of yourself, you know, it's difficult.
It is like following, like taking your own advice is much harder than sharing it out. I know this from personal experience.
Right.
So we talked a bit about the technicality of the film with regards to like casting a bit. So and I want us to talk now about just filming in Saigon, because again, that because of the atmosphere, like you said, you didn't have the budget to like block off like the streets or whatever. What was it like just like figuring out the routes that you wanted to take on the roads and like where you wanted the characters to drive? Because as you said, like Saigon itself is like a third character in the film, and like you want the audience to see parts of Saigon, but you have to make sure that where they're going tells a story. Like they're going over bridges, they're going under tunnels, you know, some scenes are light and some scenes are dark because of the lighting that changes, and they go from the daytime to the nighttime. So talk a bit about just like when you were scouting locations, figuring out the routes that you wanted the team to take and like the characters to take.
Yeah, it's funny because like, you know, Saigon is a city that is constantly changing. You know, like every time I'm away for a couple of months or weeks, or, you know, and I come back to the same place, there might be like a building knocked down, and then they starting to build a new, you know, a new construction already on top of it. So it's really the pace of the city and the change of the cityscape happens really fast. And so a lot of the times what you'll see is, you know, that the urban space is quite contrasting. You see like old buildings that have been there for decades juxtaposed with like new glass facades that literally were built what feels like overnight. Like the other day, I was just driving in the city center, and a brand new Hilton hotel just like popped up in the middle of the city. And I can't remember when they started building it, but it felt like within 2-3 months, they resurrected this like glass facade, and it's there and it's functional and it's part of like, the urban landscape. And so I think the places that we wanted to pick, or that I wanted to pick, were kind of like spots where you could see this transition. Like, for example, the bridge, we looked at a lot of bridges. There's a lot of bridges in Saigon, but the bridge that you see in the opening scene is, the area where they are. There's like a very traditional market. When she starts pushing across the bridge, you can see that the buildings are quite like older.
Yeah.
But when they're standing on the bridge, you can see in the distance that there are all these like modern, like luxurious high rises that have been built in the last few years, and they are very different in terms of architectural style, but also just like, yeah, they just like look so different. And I wanted to have, frames where you see these contrasts in one picture. And I think also a lot of like places that we decided to go to, because I think for me, when I wanted to direct the dialogue scene, when they talk on the bike, I needed to be on the street for myself. And then, to like be able to lead the team, I needed to know the street very well. So some of the streets that we scouted were just like streets that I used to live nearby, or like, maybe I spent a lot of time nearby, and I was very, very familiar with them. So when we did all these crazy filming in the middle of traffic, I wouldn't be surprised that suddenly, there's an intersection, or suddenly, there's a traffic light, but I knew those streets really, really well. So that was like the second point to inform that decision. But I also feel like Saigon is quite like the landscape is quite diverse, and I wanted to just like get a snippet of what it would be like, I really wanted like the audience to feel like they are coming on this drive with the two characters, that they are really on the back of the motorbike, like driving with them, and they can get like a slice of what the city is like, and a slice of what the atmosphere is like when you drive through the city in the course of an afternoon. Yeah. And also, so the last scene where we're at the Pink Theater in the middle of the city, that was a location that I really, really wanted, because you'll see in the last, shot that it's a place that's in the middle of the city. It's abandoned. And like in the dialogue, you don't actually know, it's just sitting there in the, in the middle of like all these newly constructed buildings. And it's something which feels almost like archaic from the past, because the stage is not being used anymore, but everyone can access it. But you also don't know what's going to happen to it. And it hasn't been demolished yet, but it's also not being used and renewed. So I just felt like that building just represents really well where Saigon is at, in terms of like development and all that. It's something from the past. It's sitting there. It's not being destroyed yet, but it might be destroyed any minute. And yeah, I really, really wanted to have the final scene there, because it's a beautiful place. It's like this gigantic theater, in the middle of the city. It's very atmospheric. It's really nice to hang out there. Yeah. And we had no backup for this location. If we wouldn't have gotten the permit for it, I would have not known where to shoot the final scene.
And I think Ma kind of like, but then you know what, in a sense, as we're talking, the thought occurred to me that Ma in a sense is kind of representative of Saigon itself. you know, like she's where she's at in her life is like a period of transition, and like from and the way you're describing it, Saigon is in an extended period of transition, you know, where it's like there's the past and then there's the present, and like areas of Saigon is like stuck right in the middle of that, and like Amma as a character seems seems that way, and I think she kind of like in a way represents like the oldish Saigon, whereas like for Bas, she kind of represents the newish Saigon, you know, like she's kind of like she's someone who travels. She went to Germany, like you, to study, and she kind of has this new way of thinking, like where she talks about when she was in Germany, like the people called her Vicky. Because apparently saying the word "va" is too hard for Germans. Really, come on now. But that's how they are, you know. And but she accepted it, and she's like, "Oh, I like the name Vicky," and like she's kind of like has that more, I guess some people would call it a modern way of thinking. Whereas and Ma's like, but how is like your name hard to see? And that's what she called her, and that's how I was the reason I've been referring to her as Va instead of Vicky is because I personally have an issue with white people saying that ethnic names are difficult to pronounce. So like, and so it's a huge pet peeve of mine.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I've actually never had anyone refer to the character as one. Yeah. But yeah, I think you're right. Like the idea was really, okay, this was my observation of the city. You know, and what would it feel like to have to drop two characters into like, you know, the fabric of this city that is constantly in motion and like constantly changing? How would people on a personal level, you know, reflect that? And I think both characters embody that that change and transition. And yeah, you're right, like for Van, that transition also includes, you know, like an external, like leaving the country and going overseas. And I think that's also like where Saigon is at, or Vietnam in general. Like, you know, we look around like our neighboring countries a lot. There's a lot of like, you know, with the colonial history, there's a lot of like, you know, looking, you know, to the other side, outside, to foreign countries and cultures. So I think that's so inherent in the culture. Um, and these two characters embody that on a personal level.
I think it's something that's present in every former colony of European countries, because in the Caribbean it's the same way. You know, we struggle with uh holding on to our African ancestry and like what that means for us, but then also the colonial imprint on our culture, you know, like from everything from our architecture to the way we speak, our dialect, our accents, and like being able to like find a ways to reconcile with that. And so like places like in Vietnam and like Thailand and like all over Southeast Asia, like there is that colonial imprint, and it's like every like you're trying to hold on to your cultural identity, and then you're also like struggling with like what does that mean, you know, like you know, so like I kind of see the characters kind of like symbolic of that. And so like and in talking about that, I want to talk like one of the last things I wanted to talk about is the score. I think the score of this was very interesting. In particular, like you kind of like meld the traditional with the contemporary, and in particular, there's a theme song. I wanted to ask you the name of that song that plays when Van and her dance team are dancing. Is kind of like a mix of traditional with contemporary and a bit of techno music for that, for the music they're dancing to. But then you kind of like at the end have a jazz. It's kind of like interpreted in a bluesy jazz instrumental. So talk to me about working with your sound, with your composer and your sound designers, and coming up with the audio for this film. If you're gonna, what do we want Saigon to sound like with regards to the music? Because we have the sound of Saigon with the traffic, you know, the people in the markets, you know, we hear the people talking and we get the dialects and everything. But how did you want Saigon to sound with regards to the music and the score of the film?
I think really early on, I wanted this specific song, and it's called Một Cõi Đi Về by a very iconic Vietnamese composer called Trịnh Công Sơn. And a lot of people were like, well, you're mad to want like, you know, a song by this composer in your little short indie film, because it's kind of like asking for like a Beatles or like a Elvis song, you know, it's going to be pricey, or the negotiations and whatnot, and clearing the rights is going to be difficult. But I thought, you know, I mean, like there is something so beautiful in the lyrics of this song, and like it's also because it's so iconic, everyone knows it. And most people, I think, would like know the lyrics of it. Even if we just like play the instrumental, people will like recognize it and then like remember the lyrics of it. And in the song, it just tells this story of you know, a person who has been on a long journey that's really tiring for many, many years, and um now is coming to like a place where, you know, even though it's tiring, they can like kind of pause and observe nature and the beauty of their surroundings. And in the far distance, they see a shadow of a person appear. And I thought, like, you know, the lyrics of this song really embodies like what the characters feel for both of them, especially for Mo, that like, you know, this distant character appears and kind of like gives her a new outlook on like her situation and her long, tiring journey. And because we're constantly playing with this notion of like old and new, of the city, and like, you know, old and new in like their characters' chapter in their lives, I also wanted to have that in the music. And we were so lucky to be working with incredible musicians. So we had so we managed to acquire the rights for this song, and I'm so happy we did. And then we had a very talented Saigonese DJ called Mess remix it into this modern track. And she's so talented. She plays all sorts of traditional Vietnamese instruments that she like took and added onto the song, and then like warp it with those like techno beats. And yeah, I really love that we got to have, you know, this really modern yet traditional version, and then at the end we have this like really stripped down, naked, classical instrumental track when we are just with Ma alone, you know, and with the quietness of the city. And we also worked with Nodi, who is a very talented, incredibly amazing French Vietnamese music producer and DJ who lives in Saigon. And he made the music for the driving montage when they drive through the traffic. So that's an original track. And I can't believe that like this happened, but like I can't believe that he agreed to score original music for us. Because actually, like, I just wanted to ask for one of his tracks that I really liked, and ask him if he could hear the music for us. And he then offered and said, like, look, I'll just make original music for you guys because I really like the film. And then B, he invited an amazing singer. Her name is Hương Thanh to feature on the track. So the voice that we hear, but then that is warped into like something more robotic, is is the voice of this like incredibly like amazing, talented musician. And she really liked the scene as well. And I remember being in the music recording studio with her and Nodi, and she would watch the scene and just like, you know, almost as if she was like possessed, like sing to that moment. And yeah, he took that recording and then like mixed it, and also used traditional instruments to like highlight that. And the most amazing thing that happened was that I thought the track was already amazing, but then after I've given the score to our sound designers, and they enhanced it with like, you know, just like the sound of the traffic and the honking and the motorbikes and the engines, it just really, really elevated the whole moment. I like yeah, I had like really had goosebumps when I heard that scene for the first time with like proper sound in the cinema, because it really felt like the streets were singing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I genuinely do love the music for the film because I've never been to Saigon. Hopefully, fingers crossed, one day I get to go there. But the music really does make you feel like what the city feels like. It fits perfectly because sometimes you can watch a film or a scene and the music will come on, you'll be like, that doesn't quite work, but this works and it complements it perfectly. And I like that there's different versions of it. Like you have like the techno, you have the modern, you have a slightly classical, you have the blues, and like it gives the sense that like the city is a city of it's not like has one identity, like the people in the city, and the city itself has different sounds, has different feels. It's like you're like, yes, the film is set in Saigon, but we have like a jazz instrumental playing at the end, and it really informs like where not only Ma is in that moment, but like the city is, and like it gives you a sense of like forlornness, and it's sad, but it's not like sad in a depressing way. Like sometimes sadness is beautiful, like you're able to sit in your emotions. And I really do genuinely love like I think the having the techno version, the traditional techno version, but then the stripped down version, as you said at the end. I love that you and your team and the musicians and everyone were able to like really say, let's show all of these different sides of Saigon through these different sides of music, because there's so many people who may never get to visit Saigon or Vietnam, but in watching a film like this and in listening to the music, you get to really not only know the city, but like the talent that exists within the city, and like what the musicians and the sound designers and everyone can add in to the stories of the city that they live in. I'm here looking at my dog and I'm here like, don't bark. Yes.
Yeah, and I think like that was really like I from the beginning I wanted to, we always say that like watching Saigon Kiss is like the cheapest way to get to Vietnam and to Saigon for 20 minutes.
Mhm.
And I really wanted to try and extract that or bring that feeling that you're really there. Yeah, you're really there. And I think at the same time, it was something that like I was also very intimidated and anxious about, because, I when we first started this project, I never shot anything in Vietnam. But one of the things we were really worried about was, how can we have dialogue in such loud streets, and everything is on a motorbike or in the streets. Like, how can we have like clean dialogue? Everything is so busy. How can we like somehow create a tapestry that reflects, the busyness and the chaos of it, but at the same time not be overwhelming and like take away and like really like just be noisy and take away from the story. So luckily I had an incredible sound team to work with, and like amazing producers, and like camera crew who's just like really really incredibly experienced of capturing just like stories that are set here. So we were really lucky about that.
And my last question is, I'm kind of going to do an inversion of the first question where I asked and how making the film helped you to like look at filmmaking differently. I want to ask you like how in making this film helped you to look at Saigon differently, because the interesting thing about the film is in the title alone, it said it has the word kiss, and the characters don't kiss. Like there's no kissing in the film. But then I kind of think like how a kiss is temporary, like like you kiss and it happens, like it's a moment in time. And the film is kind of like showing us like a moment in time of Saigon, like just it's like just giving the audience like a kiss, a brief version of Saigon. So like how in making the film have you been able to appreciate Saigon in a way that you weren't able to before, especially as you said, like you weren't fluent in the language at the beginning, having grown up in Germany, and like in making the film, you're learning more about the city and your parents' country in a way that you wouldn't have been able to do if you weren't making the film. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think like, in between, like in the process of like preparing to shoot, and then like while shooting, and then in post-production, I keep coming back to this question, like, what does Saigon mean to me? Because in a way, it's like quite, it's quite like daring to like put the name of a city that I didn't grow up in, you know, in like the title of a film, like your first film in a country that, again, I didn't grow up in. In many ways, I'm such a foreigner to this place. So I think like I always constantly reflect my relationship to like, you know, the place, what it means to me, you know, what it means to me to be here. And I think like, you know, every time I think about it, I just feel like it's just such a special city because I mean, obviously, like historically, it went through horrendous times and, you know, like was built back from scratch. The people here have like seen like terrible things and like experienced terrible like violence on this land. And um you know, to have in your everyday such warm and generous encounters is just and like for locals here to like be able to transform that, I just like am fascinated and in awe all the time. And yeah, at the same time, I think um it like I think the city reminds me of like, you know, where we come from. You know, it has all these like rich Vietnamese culture, rich, like really local culture. And then also where it could go, because, you know, a lot of the development or also just like mentality of people, like workforce is like changing as well, you know, like it's being modernized really quickly, it's being globalized really quickly. And we're constantly looking at, like I said before, like, you know, neighboring countries and other metropolises around the city, like around the area. And it's just like this little tickle of like, you know, where are we going to go as, you know, as a Vietnamese person, as, you know, as a culture, as a country. Yeah, so I think I always said this actually, that out of all the places that I lived in the world, Saigon, I feel like is truly at the pulse of our time in terms of like how fast and slow we develop. Um, yeah, I just feel like, you know, when I'm here, I can feel the heartbeat of like how modernity moves.
Yeah, like it's what I describe Toronto that way. No, it was like Toronto is a mess just for the construction. But the city. But I get what you mean because it's like as like technology is developing around the world, like so is it developing in Saigon, you know, like they're in the infrastructure is changing with it. So I get what you mean. And one of the reasons I wanted to ask you with that was, and you mentioned it in in your answer where you were saying like I didn't grow up here, so like what right do I have to use the name in the title of the film? And I think it's interesting that you had that thought because even though your parents are Vietnamese and your parents are born in and raised in Vietnam, like you struggle with that question. Had even though you are ethnically Vietnamese, you are Vietnamese, you know. But I think it's interesting that you use that in the title because like that's a question that you yourself were trying to answer, and you kind of answered it in making the film because like you understand the city, you know. And I think like sometimes in being in living outside of in being raised in different countries allows people like us to understand cities in the ways that the people born in them won't. You know, it gives you a perspective and it gives you like from the beginning you kind of have the outside perspective as someone like newly arrived and like trying to find your way around, and you're learning the city in the way that someone who was born there wouldn't, you know. And then as you spend more time there and as you're making the film and you're meeting the people in different areas of the industry, like in the music and the videography and like composition and in dance and martial arts and all these different industries, you're able to interact and get a perspective of the city and the people in ways that people outside of that wouldn't have a chance to, you know. Like how many people are going to be able to like get a inside perspective of the film industry the way that you do, you know? How many people are outside of the film industry or even within the film industry is going to be able to get to use a world famous score the way that you were able to use it in the film, you know? So like I would just say like this is just my own personal opinion, but like just be able to appreciate the fact that you are able to see the city in ways that other people don't, because no one else could make this film the way you made this film. And that has to do with your own perspective and your own experiences that you bring into the story. Because another filmmaker born in Saigon, raised in Saigon, wouldn't be able to make a Saigon Kiss the way you made this film.
Thank you. I really appreciate it because I do like it's definitely like something that is like constantly on the forefront of my mind. Also, I think because like we haven't had the opportunity to like show the film to a bigger audience in Saigon here, and I'm quite nervous about that. Like, we've been like really lucky to show the film in, we had our international premiere in Clermont-Ferrand, and then we showed in London, and we showed the film in London at BFI Flair, but the most anticipated screening for me is really like the Homecoming. Yeah. But yeah, I do think that, I mean, look, the film is a version or an observation in many ways, also like a visual diary of like my experience that I had in Saigon, like this is one version, and it's through the perspective of these characters that I've, created on the page and then have come to life. But yeah, I guess I agree with you. Like someone else who maybe grew up here or might be like entirely external and has no connection to Vietnam would probably make another encounter story.
And it would be a completely different story. It wouldn't be the story that you had. And I think that's one of the things that I really do love about film. Like film is very specific. The experiences of filmmakers really do inform like the stories that they're telling. And like whether you're a filmmaker, writer, a composer, someone like me, a film critic, whatever, like our own experiences really inform the way we see the world. And I think that's the beauty in it. Like we're helping other people to look at the world in a different way. And a film like this like made me really want to say, I really do want to visit Saigon really one of these days. But it then made me think like, what I want to have the experience of riding a motorbike in Saigon? Probably not, because I have terrible balance. But it made me appreciate it more. And as you mentioned, like the culture of like helping each other, like that's something that is not like inherent here in Canada and like Toronto, like. But you're saying like that's something that's like a part of Saigon culture. That's something that is just things that people is doing. It's teaching like the people outside of like Saigon, like who've never been there, like to get to see that side of Saigon culture, like the kindness that people extend to each other, whether you know each other or not. Like this is something you, as you said, like if I hadn't asked you that, I would have never known where you were saying like, yeah, no, this is very typical of us. And like it's a learning experience. So like thank you so much for talking with me and making the film. And I did want to ask you, the cat, how come you didn't use your cat in the film?
Because to be honest, I really wanted to, and her name is actually Boon.
Good.
But I was scared that she was gonna run away during the takes, because she's like an indoor cat and like is not used to the outdoor at all. And like I think like we considered it, but like really last minute my producer was like, no, you know what, it's a terrible idea. Like I don't want to be dealing with like your crew and you and the shoot and like whining about like your cat having run away from your own film set. So I'm very glad that we didn't end up shooting with her.
So you got a professional cat actress.
We had like two cats that came from the shelter, and the two people who run the shelter are also filmmakers, and yeah, they're really lovely people, and they were wonderful, wonderful screen cats.
Okay. Thank you so much, Hong An, for taking the time to talk to me and answer my questions and for sharing
Thank you so
about
much, Carolyn. That's like a beautiful, very beautiful conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and congratulations with the film. And on Friday, I think would have been amazing to show you like I know this year there was the first Vietnam International Film Festival, but that happened like a few months ago, I guess. So like hopefully next year or the years
Hopefully
after you'll have your own film showing at the Vietnamese International Film Festival there. But thank you so much and congratulations on the film.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Have a good night. I know it's late there, so I appreciate you staying up to talk to me.